Welcome. I'm Carrie Sipp, and I am the Southeastern Regional Community Facilitator for ACES Connection, and am very glad to be with y'all this morning. First, a little bit about ACES Connection.
Carrie, could you just wait until everyone loads in? We've got about 100, and we're expecting maybe a couple hundred more.
You got it.
Thank you.
So everybody will just thank you. I'm sorry, Allison, you had asked for that. If we could just chill for a few minutes and maybe think about things that make us happy for a few minutes. That would be great. As we wait for other people to join us, we have about 600 people who registered for the webinar today. So we're waiting for all of our attendees to show up. And Allison Sabula is our producer on this webinar, and she's going to give us the high sign when we're ready to go. If you've just joined us, we ask that you know that you're in the right place. We have a lot of people joining us for this very popular webinar this morning, and we're waiting for more attendees to come into this, this Zoom room. And as soon as we're a little closer to the number of guests we're anticipating, we will get started. So if you've just joined us, welcome. We're glad you're here. And we'll be starting this webinar in just a few minutes.
Carrie, I just unmuted myself for just a second because people can also put in the chat where they're from. We've got quite a few people from many places, so if they wouldn't mind just saying where they're coming from. I'm from California. I'm going to put it in the chat.
Great, thank you. Yes, we would love for people to do that if they would give us an idea of where everyone's coming from. While we're waiting for everyone to show up. Let's see, we've got Nebraska and Michigan and North Carolina and Florida and California and Oklahoma, Manchester, New Hampshire, Puerto Rico, let's see, Arkansas, Texas, New York, Juneau, Alaska, San Diego, Kentucky, Evanston, Wyoming, Napa, Four Oaks, Virginia, Portland, Kill Devil Hills on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Welcome. Janet Popentier, I see you're here from Texas. Welcome. And Washington, Sheboygan, Wisconsin. Hello.
I love the name Mountain Home. I wouldn't mind living in Mountain Home. That sounds like a really nice place to live. It
does sound like a really nice place to live. Let's see.
It's beautiful. So the person from there said it's beautiful. Well, good. I'm going to have to come there someday when I can travel again.
Yes. We're all looking forward to that, being able to travel again one of these days. So if you've just joined us, you're in the right place. This is the ACES Connection webinar with Elaine Miller-Karras about the community resiliency model. We're just waiting for a few more people to join us. This is really probably one of our best attended webinars.
I'm really enjoying seeing where people are from.
Yes, it's so fun. Virginia.
And I'm hearing more about that wonderful place. Daniel Grace is telling us it has lakes and rivers and outdoor stuff. So maybe, Carrie, we're going to have to go on a camping trip there after this is all. We can travel again.
Yes, that would be. We need a little R&R after all this non-R&R.
Well, I'm going to have to look up that city now and see the pictures of it when I get offline today, so see what it looks like in person.
We're talking about Mountain Home, and what state was it in? Was it Washington State?
No, I think, wasn't it North Carolina, or was it,
Let's see.
He's going to tell us.
Okay.
Arkansas. It's in Arkansas.
Oh, Arkansas is beautiful.
I've never been to Arkansas, so that's someplace I'd like to go to someday.
And it's kind of semi in the middle. We could all meet in the middle.
And we have somebody who's from California, but they're doing work in Brazil, so they must be in Brazil right now.
That's great. Well, I tell you what,
We ready?
I think
Oh, we
we're
have somebody from Canada as well. Look at that. We're international today.
in Virginia, and a Virginia Mountain Mama, which,
I love that.
yeah, West Virginia. Well, we're
I also see somebody in the question and answer from New Zealand where it's 3 in the morning.
Oh my gosh, we're so happy that you're here, New Zealand.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Adriana, welcome, Adriana.
New Zealand, Juneau, Alaska. We've got some, and who knows who else is going to show up in the midst of this, but
Someone's thinking that their chat is disabled. Adrienne Mackworth thinks her chat's disabled. So any suggestions for her, Allison from ACES?
The chat was disabled and now it's all
Yeah,
good for
so
everyone.
there's a couple people that are saying that. Sadie Liler too is saying that from Maryland.
Oh yeah, that was right at the beginning when we
Okay,
started, and now we're all good.
okay now. We're
okay.
okay now.
The
Okay.
chat is on, and we are here, and we are ready to get started. Welcome to the ACES Connection webinar on the Community Resiliency Model. I'm Carrie Sipp. I'm the Southeastern Regional Community Facilitator for ACES Connection. And if you're new to ACES Connection, know that ACES Connection is the social network for the ACES science movement. We connect people who are implementing trauma-informed and resilience-building practices to, based on ACES science, to all of our members, many, many, many different resources, including the invaluable resources we're going to share with you today. And who we have with us today. First of all, let me say that behind the scenes, making all of this run so very, very well is Allison Sabula, who is my counterpart in the Northeast. She is the Northeastern Regional Community Facilitator, and she's a producer of these brilliant podcasts that we've been doing. A New Normal, if you haven't seen one of those yet, check them out. We have with us Elaine Miller-Karras. Elaine is the creator of the Community Resiliency Model. And she is joined by Allison Wine and Kelly Purcell. Elaine is a dear friend as well. She's never turned me down to do a webinar, and we have done some webinars at some bizarre times, not like New Zealand time though, where it's 3 o'clock in the morning. We're grateful for you for being with us, Adriana. Elaine is one of the key creators of the Community Resiliency Model, which is an ACES science-based biological model for helping us become emotionally regulated whenever, during times of natural disasters or stress, or dealing with a really angry 6-year-old, or whatever it is you may be facing today. Also have with us Kelly Purcell, who is an instructional coach and multi-tiered support coordinator at a Title I elementary school where I am, which is Wilmington, North Carolina. And then our good friend Allison Wine, who is a pre-K behavioral specialist for 41 classrooms in New Hanover County, North Carolina. So talk about somebody who has seen this model in action. She also coaches girls volleyball and has had some success using the Community Resiliency Model in coaching the girls and giving them some tips with it for the varsity volleyball team here in Wilmington. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Elaine Miller-Karras, who's going to take us through a presentation that she's done countless numbers of times in 39 countries all over the world, and to Kelly and to Allison. So welcome, thank you for being with us. And we will be monitoring the chat, so if you have some questions and something big comes up, I can send a note, or Allison Sabula can send a note. So take it away, ladies. Teach us how to be regulated in a dysregulated time.
Carrie, thank you so much for inviting us to come, and welcome everyone from all around the globe. We're so grateful that you're here with us right now. I also want to just say a little bit about Kelly and Allison. I founded the Trauma Resource Institute. That's where we bring the Community Resiliency Model to many places around the globe. And we really believe in teaching natural leaders of community to be teachers of the Community Resiliency Model. So Kelly and Allison are two wonderful certified community resiliency model teachers that Carrie has told me all about their wonderful teaching. So we had the idea that we would offer this 2-part series with the 3 of us doing different parts of the presentation. And this is the way that we like to bring the model forward, because it also gives us a different perspective. I've certainly taken this all over the world, and they've been in a certain part of the world that can also maybe talk and address how that part of North Carolina has trained many, many people in the community resiliency model, from little ones to older ones and all the ones in between. So anyway, I just want to say, a shout out to be very happy that they're here with us and with me today to bring it forward. So thank you, Kelly and Allison, for that. So what we're going to be doing is, this is part 1. We'll do part 2 next week, and we'll be giving you the key ingredients of the community resiliency model. So we are going to help you learn the model, and learn the model in a way that you can hopefully start practicing in the next hour and a half, and that you will be able to have tools when you leave today that you might be able to integrate into your activities of daily living. We also want to let you know that we are an hour and a half long, which isn't very long, but we're going to take a little bio break 45 minutes in case anybody needs to take a stretch or use the restroom, so that we won't, keep you locked to the chair, and make sure that you have a break time. The other thing that we'd like to say as we get started is our world community is going through a very difficult time. The pandemic, for many of us around the world, has challenged us in many ways that were unforeseen just 2 months ago. Many of us have been hunkering down in our home with our immediate families or by ourselves for a long period of time now. Many of us are wanting to get back to live life again in whatever the new normal may be. But I think the other aspect of the pandemic has been that many of us have experienced losses. The loss of a job, the loss of our community that we used to see on a regular basis. We also may have experienced the illness ourselves, and we also may have lost people that we love to the virus. And with that, what we've been seeing, as I've been doing many webinars for around the world in the last month, is also life keeps happening. So if we were struggling with, let's say, a cancer diagnosis before the virus, we have something on top of it now that adds to our concerns. So what we've seen with the community resiliency model is these simple skills can help you bring your best self forward. And because we bring in the model and we use all the portals of being human, which is how we think, how we feel, and what we sense. And this will hopefully be made very clear to you as we go through today and next week's webinar. So with that, I'm going to turn this over now to see if Kelly or Allison want to say something as the introduction as we're getting started.
Welcome. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and we're so excited to be here with you today. Allison has posted the activity book, the booklet, in the chat. So if you'd like to access that, you can download it and also have it for future reference as well. So I'm super grateful to be here with you today.
Yes, welcome everybody. And thank you, Elaine, for the lovely introduction. We were able to become certified teachers last January, so it's been about 1.5 years now, and we've really tried to get this spread through our community. And obviously with the pandemic right now, we're continuing to spread it online. So we're really happy that we're here and we're reaching more than just our community in Wilmington. So thank you.
There's one thing I wanted to ask both of you, because I know that I do this for myself. Do you all use the skills for yourself? I mean, and this is to Carrie too. Do you ever put that oxygen mask on first before you do other things right now?
Yes.
Yeah.
As you can tell, I'm a little nervous. So I'm grateful to be here. And yes, that's been essential with this model, is helping to use it for myself. Honestly, I've really used the skills for myself to regulate, and then to be able to share it with my teachers and the students that I work with has been incredibly helpful.
Well, Kelly, and someone just said in the chat that don't be nervous that they don't bite. So that's pretty
Wonderful.
yeah.
Thank you.
And Allison, is anything you'd like to say as we're getting started today?
Well, I can definitely tell you that I previously, before my position as a behavior specialist, I taught kindergarten. So I'm used to talking to little people. And so, you know, talking to adults is it's a whole different thing. So I've definitely found that after learning the skills, you know, doing public speaking for adults and not people half my size, they've been very helpful, but also just in all aspects of my life. And I have a few examples of that I'll share as we move through the presentation as well.
Great. And from my standpoint, it was amazing to me when I moved to Wilmington about 14 months ago. I came here because Wilmington has a very active ACEs initiative. It's called the New Hanover Resiliency Task Force, and there are about I think they're close to 700 members of that task force. And so I met Kelly and Allison actually through the New Hanover Resiliency Task Force. And in this county, the county government said, we want our employees, 1,600 county employees, to have access to this community resiliency model. And actually, Elaine and I think they already knew about it when Elaine and I did a webinar with some county leaders back in September of 2018, right after Florence hit. But now the county has given people, employees, time off to take a one-day training, a 3-hour training, or a 1-hour overview. And from what I understand, more than 1,000 county employees in New Hanover County have had this. And they leadership truly credits the response to different natural disasters, Florence, Dorian, and now the pandemic, in large part to the fact that so many first responders in this county have been trained in how to regulate themselves and how to be grounded in the midst of crisis. And so they've used it, and yes, I do use it. And as you know, and I show this thing a lot, which is probably annoying as heck, but you know, with Kelly, one time we did a little art project with art teachers in New Hanover County to come up with a collage of ways that we can get ourselves back into our regulated state. And it was so much fun to do this. And sometimes all I need to do is just look at this thing and it takes me down a few notches. So I keep it handy.
Oh, good. And so, and hopefully those are resources, Kelly. You were cultivating her resources, and we'll talk more about that in just a little bit. So why don't we move forward? And we are going now to the activity booklet. But I'm going to just put the slide on because we're going to be doing resiliency pauses today and the next time we meet. And we hope that you might be able to even adopt resiliency pauses into your life right now when we need it. I'm hunkering down with my husband. We've been married for a really long time, and sometimes he drives me crazy. I'm sure I drive him crazy too. So we have to take these resiliency pauses to remind us that we really like each other, even though we're very only have each other right now in terms of who we see on a daily basis, at least in person. We do see a lot of people online. But so I think what we want to say about a resiliency pause is we want to remember in life what else is true. That we may be suffering, we can be having all sorts of things happening to us, because it can be a certain sense of chaos for some of us, but there are also other things that are true about us and the people that we care about. But so we'd like to ask you 3 questions, and you can answer all or just one. What or who uplifts you? What or who gives you strength? What or who helps you get through hard times? So just take a few moments to think about. You can see it's there in your activity booklet too. This page is there where you can write in the activity booklet if you don't have an activity booklet, you can just write on a piece of paper or just think inside of yourself what the answers are. And what I'd like to invite you to do is to add some details to it. Like for me, I could tell you that what uplifts me is my granddaughter. Her name's Madison, and she's a spunky little gal. Right now, she doesn't want to wear clothes very much. And since they're hunkered down, she's usually in a little pair of underpants. They live in San Diego, swimming in a little pool. And she comes from a long line of feisty women. I can tell you that. And when I think of her, I don't know if you saw that I leaned back. Those of you that have your videos on, I took a deep breath and I put my hand to my heart. So it definitely brings me a sense of well-being, not just the thought of her, but the sense of it. And we'll be explaining more of that as we go through. So what we'd like to invite you to do is to put what your answers are into the chat right now. So maybe we can, throw that net out and cultivate those resources that are in this worldwide community that are with us today. I just see someone says, my husband and kids, children, my husband and dog, my son, my family, my 2 daughters, my faith in God, my therapist. There we go, those for therapists. God and family, joy, Jesus.
I saw nature in there, and of course,
You did see nature too. They're coming in pretty fast, so I can't exercise. Many people are saying their family gardening. That's the first one I've seen.
I haven't seen any bread baking.
Yeah.
Yoga. Oh, the night sky. And it was so beautiful last night because the full moon. Meditation and mindfulness. My 8-year-old, still so sweet and snuggly. I think that's so wonderful. My faith in Christ and Jesus. SEL training. Social emotional learning training. Yes. Somebody else has grandchildren there, granddaughters. I like to Bible journal and crochet, sew. Oh, playing the ukulele. Wouldn't that be nice to hear, wouldn't it?
Listening to the Partridge Family always brings these
good memories. Music can be really important for many of us, right? It can take us back to a time in our life. My pagan roots, someone says. Music.
Mm-hmm. Cooking, yoga, nature. Yeah, cooking has been good.
Cooking, yoga, and nature. I love the 3 of those.
Mm-hmm.
So as you're seeing, as we're reading them out loud, my children's laughter, it's also something I notice in myself that when I see these and I even read them out loud, that there's something additional that happens to me. It's like the sensations of well-being grow inside of me. Even my hands are kind of more expansive, and I'm noticing that on the inside. So I'm going to ask you another question. We'll be talking about our first skill a little bit later. It's called tracking or reading the nervous system. If any of you are noticing sensations inside your body, I am going to invite you to also put them in the chat now. Like I am noticing a very deep breath. And, Rebecca's noticing warmth.
Mm-hmm. It was amazing. His wife's smile brought him peace, and that did evoke a great sense of warmth.
Yes. A calmness, calm and peace.
Shoulders relax. Mm-hmm. I see light.
I noticed less tension. I had some tension in my shoulders, and I didn't notice it until it was gone. There we go. Belonging. A feeling of expansion too. So we want to just show you that every thought, every feeling, every belief has a corresponding sensation. And we'll be talking much more about that as we go through. So thank you everyone for sharing and for being involved with our resiliency pause right now. The next thing we want to share with you is called iChill. And we also have a website that's iChillApp.com if you don't have a smartphone. But this is where you can listen and learn about the skills of the community resiliency model. It has images. You can actually rate yourself where you are today. And so this is for all of you. It's free of charge. And we also just launched 2 weeks ago, if any of you are Spanish speakers or know Spanish speakers, it's also in Spanish now. All right.
And I will just say, it's astounding to me, Elaine, the incredible number of resources and that you make free, you make available at no charge, and your generosity in doing these webinars. And I want to thank you too for, you talked with the Campaign for Trauma-Informed Policy and Practice a couple of weeks ago, and we're really thrilled that there are some of their members who are on this call as well. So welcome to the Campaign for Trauma-Informed Policy and Practice.
Yeah, and someone just asked what the app icon looks like. It looks just like that. That's what it looks like. Okay, so why a biological model? I think this is my part again. And Carrie, I'm going to even invite you to step in because you're so, what can I say, so savvy about ACEs science. But I think it's really important that when we talk about the biology of the community resiliency model, because we know with ACEs, right, that something happens to many of us when we're children. And the more ACEs we have, the more deleterious effects, the more effects it can affect our mental and physical health. And so this is a beautiful slide that you all created. I think some of us nudged you a little bit about adding climate change, and then we didn't know about the pandemic. And so I actually added the pandemic in there as we were preparing for the slide for the presentation, because we know that the pandemic and the impact of the pandemic on children can also amplify their risk, which is why it's so important that we invest our time as the adults in children's lives of trying to be our best selves as we come forward, and also help our little children because they can learn the skills as well. That's why I love that Kelly and Allison are with us today, because they also can give us some little ideas about how we can help children learn these concepts as well. So Carrie, do you have anything you want to say about this wonderful slide that you created?
That ACEs Connection is updating this, and I'm not sure exactly when it will be out, but we are revising it to include the pandemic, and we'll post on it very shortly.
Okay, great.
Yeah, but thank you for doing a quick job of putting it in there, because it certainly belongs there.
Well, and those of you that may not be familiar with the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, it started a revolution in the country, in the world, because it was really the first time that someone did such a large study of over 17,000 people that showed that our childhood experiences did impact our mental and physical health. And so here on the slide, there can be things that happen to us that can traumatize us in our household. There can be things in the community, such as community violence, substandard schools, but there also can be environmental hazards that can also impact us. So it's so important that we look at the whole picture when we think about how adverse childhood experiences impact all of us. I, for example, have 4 more that puts me at lots of different risks, but I also have something else, which are resiliency factors that have helped reduce the impact of the ACEs that I experienced as a child growing up. And this is why I love the work of Dr. Christina Bethel at Johns Hopkins. And she's one of the leading researchers in trying to find out, what is it about ACEs, and what are the things that can reduce the impact of ACEs. So in one study that she did, she defined resiliency as staying calm and in control when faced with a challenge. And what she found, that when children ages 6 to 17 were able to do that, guess what happened? It reduced the impact of ACEs, and they had higher rates of school engagement, and they demonstrated more resilience. So that means they had more engagement with others. So, but not all of us have that ability to stay calm. And so what we have learned through the community resiliency model, that when we learn to use these 3 portals of thinking, feeling, and sensing, we can, with intention, whenever we want to, even in the midst of chaos, bring calm to our mind, body, and spirit. And we'll be sharing more of that in just a few minutes. So what we've learned, most importantly, is the adversities that happen to us in life, including what's happening right now with the pandemic, does not define us, and that it's not our destiny. And there are things that we can do to help ourselves and our families right now, not having to wait, because there's been a lot of discussion. I've had a lot of people call me, like media, saying, well, what are we going to do when we stop, having to hunker down? And I said, well, some of us are not hunkering down yet. And so what we have to do is create mental health strategies and well-being strategies for us right now that we can also take to the aftermath when there is the new normal, when we start living our lives back in a different way.
Right, and we're truly hoping that this is going to be a better normal when we come out of this. And one other note about the positive childhood experiences in Christina Bethel's work. It's very interesting. I just listened to a podcast with her a little earlier this week, and even in the absence of adverse childhood experiences, people who do not have positive childhood experiences don't fare as well as people who may have some ACEs, but also have a lot of positive childhood experiences to offset that. And so this time is such a great time for creating positive childhood experiences. And ACEs Connection has, in our parenting during the pandemic, or parenting and ACEs, a lot of great resources for that. Just throw that in.
Thank you for that. And I also, you remind me of a story, and I want to tell it because it's a very extreme story, but I was in last October, I was in Rome, and I did a presentation for the United Nations counselors in Rome. And I asked this question about, what helped people get through hard times. And one woman raised her hand and she said, when she was a little girl, she grew up in Sri Lanka during a civil war. And what she remembers about that time, and she was just a little girl, was her grandmother bringing her siblings and her cousins together and having them do skits about life, about their little lives, and had to do with their well-being, not about hearing the bombs on the outside. And she says, when I think about that time, I know there are bombs out there, but it's so small compared to the joy that I experienced with my siblings and my cousins and with my grandmother. So I think that illustrates, Carrie, your point about those positive life experience, even when there are terrible windstorms of life that can really change our lived experience, that help bring us back to our resilient zone, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, though we're saving attractions for that. I know that's coming up soon, isn't it? So, but I wanted to talk about our perspective shift, because I think this is important at the times that we're living right now. And there's conventional thinking that says people are bad, they just need to be punished. What's wrong with them? And that's been the way that many of us, were raised and said, we just have to punish those people. They need to stop making excuses. But trauma-informed perspectives, which ACEs has been a leader in, started saying things like, people are suffering. I think they need an intervention, but we have to have understanding to know that maybe something happened to them, and maybe the behaviors that they have are directly linked to what happened to them as children. And if we can learn what that impact is in terms of our mind and our body and our spirit, what happens to children and how that impacts adults and our development as adults, then maybe we can craft interventions, not only interpersonal interventions, but social policy that can help really change our world in a very positive way. So the question is, what happened to you became part of the vocabulary that many of us started to use. So many of you may have heard the term, well, what does it mean to be trauma informed? So that's important, but it's only part of the equation. And for us at the Trauma Resource Institute, and I know with ACEs Connections, because we've had many conversations about that, it's really important to also be resiliency informed. And what does that mean to be resiliency informed? It means that people are resilient, that we have seen all over the world, even in the worst of times, that people have this ability to bounce back, that we can have compassion for people as they learn new skills, as well as we can also know that people can learn how to regulate their own nervous systems. And when they learn how to regulate their own nervous systems, we've seen that that well-being expands and it can reduce their suffering. So the most important questions are the ones, the resiliency pause questions that we asked. And here's another way to ask those questions. What is right with you? what are your strengths? I remember asking a young child that had been in foster care. He was now like a teen, and I said, well, what helped you get through all those foster homes that you were in? And he said, my faith. So even with all that he'd been through, his faith was a guiding principle that helped him get through some really tough times as a child. So I think these are the kinds of things that we can also start incorporating right now when we're in the midst of the pandemic. All right. So key concepts 1. All right, I'm going to turn it over to one of my co-presenters now.
So the first key concept that we're going to be discussing today is the resilient zone. And if you notice at the top of the screen, it says the OK zone. This is a state of well-being in the mind, body, and spirit. When you are within your resilient zone, you're able to handle the stresses of life. You're able to manage the ups and downs, which is why if you notice in the middle of that, you see the wave. The resilient zone, throughout your day, there can be times that you have more stress than others. But the most important part of being in that zone is that we want to make sure we're there so we can make the best decisions for ourselves and for others. And sometimes this zone gets confused with a happy zone. And so this slide shows us that it is not only a happy zone, it is where we feel okay. So if you'll notice, you can see we can be excited and still stay in our resilient zone. We can be worried, we can be relaxed, we can be sad, happy, scared. But we are still able to make the best decision for ourselves and others while we manage those emotions staying in our zone. However, we have some things that happen, and some people may be experiencing this right now, and others in the past, and unfortunately, moving forward, there are stressful things that happen in life, traumatic events, things that are triggers for us that can bump us out of our zone. And when we're bumped out of our zone, we typically go one of two ways. You can be bumped high. You can get stuck in the high zone. If you're bumped high, that's where you'll see signs of being edgy, being irritable, having some anxiety, maybe angry outbursts. Or on the other side of it, you could be bumped down into the low zone, which is where people experience depression and sadness and isolation, withdrawal from connections with people, having fatigue. And it is human nature that we all get bumped out. Sometimes we get bumped high, sometimes we get bumped low, sometimes we fluctuate between the two. But the most important thing is, and what this model is teaching us, is how to not get stuck in one of those places.
Well, I'm just going to say I have been in the high zone. I'm just wondering if anybody besides me that's listening has ever been in the high zone. And if you want to tell us in the chat, just yay or no, like you've never experienced it. I don't know if I believe you if you say no, because most of the people I've met all over the world, yes, look at that. I've been in both times. And how about the low zone? I've also been in the low zone. I think our panelists, because I've asked you those questions before, haven't you been in the high and low zone? Look at that. People are saying yes, both, yes. So this is the human condition, isn't it, Allison? It just is the way that we are as human beings. It's really important to know that. And this is true, whether we're kids or whether we're adults. Go ahead, Kelly, what did you say?
And I love that this language, it creates a common language and even more compassion for ourselves and others when we can identify it's what's happening with ourselves and others. I think that's really important.
And one of the sweetest things I've ever seen was one day when I was visiting Kelly at this beautiful school where she was before she's at the current one, Freeman. and a little boy who was maybe 7 years old, Kelly. We were asking him about using the community resiliency model, and he pulls out a little piece of paper and he says, well, I was in this zone, but now I'm in this zone. And the sweetest thing, Elaine, and you'll love this, and
I
it's
love that. So it makes me happy to hear these stories, you know.
But it's been a resource for me to think about this little guy saying, and I can help my sister get out of her low zone and get into her green zone. And so kids love this. And if we can teach this to children when they're young, imagine how much less violence there might be going forward if a kid can identify where he or she is and know from these beautiful tools how to get out of being stuck in the not good parts of the low zone, in the depression. And
well, I think that's what's so lovely. And I've heard so many stories around the world where they've taught the skills to someone, a little person, and the little person's taught another little person, but also the little person's taught the adult in their life. And I heard one mom told me once, she said, oh my God, my son came home from school and he goes, Mom, I think you're in the high zone quite a bit. We need to figure out how to get you back into your okay zone. So I think it is something that when people learn it, I think it tends to cultivate more well-being, because it also is not, it's not a negative way of looking at behavior. And that's not to say that there are things that we can do in the high and low zone that aren't good for us. But if we understand, and I just talked to someone yesterday who said he'd recognized that he was in the low zone, and he had been in the low zone a lot when he was younger, but he hadn't been as an adult, but that with the being inside, and he could feel those same kind of sensations. But he said, then I did something that got me to the bottom part of my resilient zone. And that made such a big difference. So it does. And I love this. It breaks down the fear of the unknown. And I think that's one of the things about talking about it in that way. So Allison, I'm going to keep going. I did a little interruption there, but talk about this slide.
You're good. So that brings us right into the depths of our resilient zones. It's important to notice that the depth of our zones can change depending on what experiences we've had in life. It also is that some people are born with more narrow zones than others. And the good news about this is that we can extend the width of our zones. And that is the goal, is to make our resilient zone as wide as we possibly can. That way, we are able to handle more stressors in a more appropriate way. So the more that we learn these wellness skills and that we integrate them into our lives, the more we work on our resilient zone and we work on making that wider. I can give you an example. For me, I'm in Wilmington, North Carolina now, but I'm originally from Maryland and lived in the DC, Baltimore area. And something that bumps me out of my zone pretty quickly is traffic. And I think probably some other people can relate to that. And so, learning these wellness skills, I've been really working on noticing when I'm bumped out. And the nice thing about these skills is that they're accessible everywhere. So I've been able to use these skills in my car when I'm driving, when I'm bumped out of my zone, and instead of maybe some unkind word coming out of my mouth, I'm able to pause, use a skill, and get back in my zone so that I can continue and not say something I maybe would regret later.
Someone asked a question about saying more that we're born with different widths of our zone. And I think that we're all born with different temperaments. And maybe you know this in your own family. You can have 5 or 6 kids in one family, and some kids just tend to react more quickly to things and sometimes get themselves into more trouble. And some children seem to just, it's like water off a duck's back. It's like when Christina Bethel says, children who have the ability to stay calm. So, and that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with us. It just means that we may have a more excitatory nervous system, and that we may have to cultivate more skills to help us widen that resilient zone.
2, we know from studies of epigenetics that people who have been exposed to, and whose ancestors, in fact, have been exposed to structural racism, systemic trauma, even people whose great-grandparents were in concentration camps. Their resiliency zones may have been affected by their biology of their ancestors. People who come from families where there is a lot of fear, sometimes that fear is actually passed on intergenerationally. People who seem to, the families who have a high, a high set point for being excited or temperamental, that's an angry family. But the great news is that with this work, in practicing self-regulation, we can widen our zones, even if it's biologically, there is a biological attachment to it.
Yeah, and there's a really wonderful question that said, can you please speak to a correlation between the width of your resilient zone and the propensity towards addiction? That is a great question, because what we know from the Adverse Child Experiences study is that the more ACEs you had, the greater your chances were. For example, I think if it was 6 or more, you had an exponentially much higher chance of being an IV drug user. So what I think about this is that when we have childhood experiences, I think it can narrow our zone. And so I think if any of you have had to deal with any kind of challenges or addiction, is that people will do almost anything to feel like they're somewhat like numbed out or okay, or to get into that okay zone. And if we don't have skills that we've learned that are organic, sometimes people choose to use substances or also do what I call adrenaline seeking behaviors. If you're in your low zone so much, you may say, oh, I'm going to go and, drive my motorcycle in the desert at 100 miles an hour because I feel alive. So yes, I think it does impact addiction, because of our experience can affect the width of our zone, so that if we can expand and work on cultivating wellness skills to expand our resilient zone, I think that we can also be very helpful to people that have a propensity towards behaviors that are not good for them.
And this language takes the shame out of that. As someone who's been in recovery for 26 years myself, and the shame that goes along with that, being able to say, to speak to narrow zones or wider zones or whatever, is infinitely less shame evoking than needing to go find a cigarette or find a drink or find some sugar or whatever.
Thank you, Carrie, for sharing that, because I think that leads us into the next part of our discussion, which are, these are 6 different domains of human existence. What happens to us during or after a stressful event or a traumatic event, and what does it change the way we think, the way we feel, the way our physical body reacts? Does it affect our spiritual beliefs, our behaviors, and our relationships? So I just want to take just a minute or so to take a look at these different domains and to see whether or not you've had the experience, either yourself or with people that you've known, with children or with adults, that you've seen these kinds of reactions. And if you think there's anything missing, because this is not an exhaustive list, because I've asked these questions all over the world, what do you think are things that need to be added? And you can add them to the chat if you'd like. And I also want to highlight right now the physical symptoms that are here. The numbness, physical pain, sleep problems, sleeping too much or not enough, stomach upset, that people may be experiencing right now. And sometimes we don't necessarily make the connection that it's the stress. We think, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me physically? Besides having to be here with my husband all day long, I now have whatever that may be. So that to know that the way that we're designed, there's a mind and body connection. And people are adding things like inappropriate humor, overachieving, obsessing, blaming, desire to hide, clinging. Yeah, I think we can see these different kinds of behaviors. Yes, and someone says my Crohn's disease flared up during the pandemic. And so if we do have some underlying condition that we can get, it can become amplified. And especially those that are connected, that we know that stress can produce flare-ups and different kinds of things that we may be experiencing in life. lashing out verbally. I think I did that to my husband one day. So yes, I'm sure I'm not the only one. I hope I'm not the only one. Maybe it will make me feel more normal at times. But yes, fear projected as racism and other othering attitudes and behaviors. Yes, and we've seen that. I think we've seen that with some of the stigma that some people are experiencing as a result of, for example, being of Asian descent because of the pandemic apparently starting in China.
All
Yes.
of these different issues that are being, or symptoms or body, the somatic response to trauma are just so true. The controlling boundary issues, you know, when so much is out of control, people who have high ACEs, some of us will want to control everything that we possibly can. And obsessing is anything is better than being in reality if it's scary sometimes. And so that's where the obsession jumps in. But
I also want to thank Bethany for saying that I wasn't the only one that was getting mad at her husband. Thank you for being with me. Yes. Right. Okay. And I love what this person just said too. The social media is filled with people who are complaining because their sleep has been affected. And I think that for many of us, you know, getting up in the middle of the night, that might be novel to us because I think there's just a lot of worry and concern. So, you know, what we've learned about the model is that it can help for helping people sleep for some people. Also, strange dreams. Yes. Thank you everyone for, you know, for adding to our lists. But I think the most important takeaway about this is that these are things that really happen to many of us, that they're not because something's wrong with us. It's because we're human that we're having these kinds of experiences.
And the body stores trauma, and when it's touched on again by a current event, it can touch on something from way back that may not have been expressed or dealt with yet.
Right. And so here's a slide that we put together that has to do with things that are coming up right now because of COVID-19 to kind of add to our previous slide. And I'm not going to go through every single one, but I think I'll just highlight some. I've seen, certainly, and personally had the fear of catching and spreading the virus to loved ones. My husband has a precondition, and so we are really careful here at our house. And I, 2 weeks ago, had 5 days of fever and went up to 101. I thought for sure I had COVID. I was really scared, honestly. I was able to get tested, and I was negative. So obviously I had something else. I don't know how I got it, but I imagine if people are listening, have you been thinking about if you get a cough, if anything happens that maybe before you would have thought nothing of, that you're thinking, oh my goodness, do I have it? And will I survive if I do get it? And if I do get it, I don't want to share it with anyone else because I don't want anybody to be responsible also for that. And I've heard this over and over again. And then also, I think the other thing I want to talk a little bit about was polarization and how this can be impacting our families and people even in our neighborhoods. You know, there are some people that believe we really need to always have a mask on when we go outside. And there's some people that believe that we're going way too far. That's ridiculous. If we're 6 feet away, you don't need to have a mask. So I heard someone talking yesterday saying, well, I had cancer, and if you don't wear a mask, you could be causing me to lose my life. So that's a pretty strong statement, right? When someone else is saying, well, it's my civil rights that I don't need to wear a mask. So I'm worried about that further polarizing us as a community. And so to remember what's true. I have a dear friend who doesn't wear a mask, and I love him dearly. I know if I needed something, he'd be here in a minute. So, I mean, I just choose that I wear a mask because of my husband. So, and because I know that if he were to get something, that he has a high risk of dying. He's in his late 60s. So there's different perspectives that we have based on our lived experience. And I think that is something that can be an umbrella that's overshadowing also our individual experiences right now. And certainly when we talk about the financial, housing, and food insecurity that we're seeing for the first time since the Depression, you know, thousands upon thousands of people lining up for food banks because their food is getting scarce. And because we also in this model really look at the mental health issues that people have before even the pandemic started, that people can be feeling, and being and touch into an amplification of symptoms, even if they've had a certain sense of feeling like they're recovering from whatever they've been experiencing.
Right. And Elaine, fear is contagious, just like being regulated can help regulate others. When we're all dysregulated, when people are so fearful, it is contagious.
Right. And that's why, as we can, staying in our more regulated state as much as humanly possible and catching ourselves when we're getting bumped out becomes really part of a life skill that we can use over and over again. So as we come into this slide, this is a little bit different. What are common reactions that are occurring right now for some of you, and maybe have happened to you because of past life traumas or stresses that have contributed to your well-being? And these are a few things that people have said, but I'm also going to invite you that if there have been other things that you've seen, I have lots of gratitude to my next door neighbors, because my husband and I are not going and shopping at the stores, and they have called me and said, hey, we're going down to the supermarket. They're like in their early 40s, and they go down and get groceries for me. They've never done that before. So I've seen a certain sense of generosity that has been really expansive and kind since this started for me personally. So that would be something that I would add. Anybody have anything else they want to add? Acceptance, patience, and
Grace, yeah, beautiful.
And the gratitude, being able, I know it's on this slide, but I find that gratitude is one of the quickest ways to shift me out of one state and into another.
yes.
The old gratitude list is a very valuable tool.
Really, understanding and trust.
Kindness.
The full continuum of human behavior. Oh, I love that. Seeing beauty even during pain and suffering.
Seeking to understand, I love that one.
When I see greater peace and love for one another, I took a very deep breath. Thank you, everybody, for sharing, and keep putting them in there as we move forward. So Kelly, was this the part that I'm going to do now, right?
Yes.
Yes. So I'm going to just talk briefly about, what are some facts about the community resiliency model? First of all, it can be used across the lifespan, from people that are pregnant, that are carrying a baby on the inside, to children in different stages of development, all the way up to older individuals. My father-in-law lived with my husband and I until he died. He was 105. He died last September. And I would do some of the skills with him. And he was not too old to be able to learn these skills, even when he had dementia at the very end of his life, like the last year. Can you imagine that? 104, he got dementia. But also it can be used across cultures. It's so important for all of us to know, wherever we've come from, wherever we have lived, whatever our ethnic background may be, that we all have a nervous system. And those common reactions that we've talked about already, about resiliency and about some of the distressful things that happen to us, I've asked those same questions, and they're the same whether I am in Nepal, whether I'm in Tanzania, whether I'm in Ireland or England, or whether I'm in different parts of the United States or Canada. I haven't been to New Zealand yet, but I imagine it probably is the same there as well. And so that really, it always is something that's very life-giving to me as a human on the planet, to think as much as we have respecting differences, we also have so much that is in common that we share with our world community. The other aspect of the model is that we also, it doesn't matter if you know how to read or write, if you're a small child and you don't know how to read yet, or if you're a person that didn't have the advantage of education, worked a lot in Haiti, in the Central Plateau, where it doesn't mean that they were darn smart, but they didn't have the same access to education. The model also, we focus on the biology of the human nervous system. And like we've already talked about, that there's common human reactions that we've seen all over the world. But what we do in CRIM, when people ask me, Elaine, what's your elevator speech? I said, well, I really help people to learn to read their nervous system. Because when they can do that, when they can tell the difference between sensations of distress and well-being, they have a choice of what to pay attention to. Many things that have happened to us, for instance, as children, the 4 ACEs that I have, wasn't my choice that I experienced those, but it's my choice now whether I can track my nervous system, and when I can sense that I'm getting bumped out. Like when I get into my high zone, I get hot ears. My ears literally get hot, and I go, oh my gosh, I'm getting there. I better do a skill in order to get back into my zone so that I can show up as my best self. So that really is the essence of, is paying attention to sensations, and also the laws of nature, that we're from all parts of the world that are on this call. There are storms, there are beautiful days. Guess what? There's storms and beautiful days within our nervous system too. And if we start paying attention to those sensations of well-being, they expand, just like with the garden. There's weeds all over the world, but there's also times that we plant flowers and vegetables. If we only water the weeds, they would expand. But if we watered and we started focusing on watering the well-being within our nervous system, like the garden, right, of the flowers and the vegetables, guess what? That expands. And that is based on neuroscience, because what fires together, wire together, I'm going to come to that a little bit more, but neuroplasticity is also the brain can change. So no matter where you've been from the moment that you've heard this, you can start paying attention right at this moment to your sensations of well-being. And because the brain can change, and that there is that possibility of change because of the concept of neurogenesis, that we can create new brain cells. Neurons are brain cells, and connections between brain cells throughout a lifetime. And there we have the slide that I loved about what we pay attention to grows. And this comes from a very, very dense theory, Hebbian's theory, and Carla Schatz at Harvard had a very simple way to explain it, that brain cells that fire together wire together. And that brings us to this very important part of our model, which is paying attention to the autonomic nervous system, which some of you may also be needing to take a bio break that we haven't taken yet, that we need to do. But before we do that, we're going to do one more thing before we go to a break. And it's going to just be 5 minutes. And that is, we're going to experience our autonomic nervous system. So you can either stand or you can stay sitting. I'm going to stay sitting because of my light stuff and everything that I have. But what I'm going to invite you to do is right now, move your hands, and if you can see me, come on, everybody, you can move. And if you want to do jumping jacks, oh my goodness, we can do that. But let's get our body moving. Okay, come on, let's see if we can get pumped up. I can even feel my body. I can feel my feet moving. Oh my goodness. All right. Okay, stop. All right. So now, oh my goodness, even doing that, my heart rate is up. So how about you and Kelly and Allison? You're beating your heart rate up a little bit?
Yep.
Breathing faster?
Definitely.
All right, that's your sympathetic nervous system. That's the part of your nervous system that prepares for action. It's a really good part of our nervous system, right? Because we need sometimes to get away from threat. We need to be alarmed if there is something that we need to maybe fight. So when we have the sympathetic nervous system, think about it as the accelerator of your car, of your body, right? So all the energy, right, in your body and the blood flow goes to your arms and legs. So it gives you actually more energy. And some of you may be feeling more energy and even more awake when we just did that little exercise. So we help people learn to track that, because some of us who've had a lot of stress and trauma, we can just be sitting here looking like we're calm, but on the inside, our nervous system can be ramping up. It's like we put our car into park and we're gunning the engine. The car's not moving, but on the inside it is. And this is what can be difficult regarding adverse child experiences, for example. When this happens as a child, sometimes it doesn't turn off. So that means all the stress hormones are kind of pumped in your system. So one of the things we want to do with this model is also access your parasympathetic. So right now, if you were to move in slow motion as you get up and take a bio break, I'm going to invite you to notice, is your nervous system slowing down? Are you taking a slower breath like I just did? Kelly's going like this, yes. Mm-hmm. So that is something that will happen when we put the brake on. Also, a very important thing that Louise just said, activation of the sympathetic nervous system also suppresses the immune system response that makes us more vulnerable to every type of disease, which is why we want to invest in our well-being. So saying that, I'm just going to take a break right now, a 5-minute bio break, because we have to come back and Kelly's going to start teaching us some skills. All right, so can we take 5 minutes, which will bring us back at 9:09. Okay, I'm on California time. You're
Okay.
all in different time zones. Just come back in 5 minutes. It's going to be different for everybody. Look at New Zealand. It's really early in the morning.
She'll be back at 4:10. Yes. When we come back, I'd like to say just a couple of words about the disparity between people who are living in crowded conditions, in poverty, and how that is affecting some groups more adversely, how COVID is affecting some groups more adversely, if we've got time for that.
Do you think we could do that the next time we meet? Because there's a point in the slide set for next time that there would be a perfect time to talk about that.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, 'cause we would really love to get to the skills so that
Yeah, let's do that. Give them something they can take away.
Yeah, and then we can talk about that in part 2.
Yeah, I think that sounds great.
Yes, does this end in 25 minutes? Yes, it does. But we're going to get to some of the skills, yes. I think we're going to get to a real healthy help now, and then we can save the other 2 for the
Questions that you have, we have the session next week, and more will be revealed if you haven't seen what you wanted to see or hear what you wanted to hear. And Kelly's going to get us into.
Wonderful. So we'll get started with the community resiliency model skills. And as Elaine has mentioned, the tracking is a key component to the skills. It's a crucial skill in the model. So we kind of use it as a hand. Tracking is really the center of our model for the skills. And then there are 5 other skills that return to tracking that are based on tracking our nervous system to calm and regulate our nervous system. So there's the basic 3, resourcing, grounding, and help now. And we're going to go ahead and get into some help now that can help right in the moment to regulate the nervous system. And a key thing to remember with these skills, as Elaine mentioned at the beginning, to use them for self-care. It really is important to put our mask on first so that we are able to help others and serve others from an overflow and be able to be regulated, because that is incredibly important in this work. So help now or reset now are 10 basic skills that can help in the moment. They can help regulate your nervous system, turn down the sympathetic and turn on the parasympathetic. So turn on that brake of your nervous system. And one of the things about help now is it can be helpful to practice them when you're in your resilient zone so that you feel what it feels like to really be regulated and have those go-tos. And knowing that not all help now skills will help in every situation, but knowing that you have this set of skills that can be used to help really regulate your nervous system in the moment. And one of them is drinking a glass of water, which, as you've seen, I've been doing that. It can really help to calm when you notice the sensations of drinking water. It helps to create that regulation. And another one that I love to use with students, as well as I used it the other day when I was bumped out, is to touch a surface and feel the texture. And we'll talk more about sensation words and sensory language. But if you can touch a surface, I invite you now, if you'd like to participate, to try that. Just touch a surface and feel, is it soft? Is it smooth? Is it rough? That can really help to bring you back into the present moment and bring our nervous system and our thoughts and back into the present moment. And the next skill is to look around the room and pay attention to anything that catches your eye. So I invite you, if you'd like, to take a moment and look around for anything that catches your eye. And I notice that when I do this, I literally come back to the present moment. That causes my attention to focus there, so that I'm now not thinking about the future. I'm not thinking about the past. I'm in the present moment, and I can really be here and in this present moment.
Someone says that they have a beautiful plant on their desk and they're looking, and when they look at it, they do some breathing. So that attention. I know the other thing I've noticed is that I've been doing all of them with you and I've been yawning. And so yawning is a release of the autonomic nervous system. So when we have different kinds of sensations like yawning or tingling, we go, oh yeah, your body's coming back into a more balanced state.
Yeah, notice that. And yawning can be a great way to tell that your body is releasing that sensation of distress. So
it's also contagious, which is wonderful, because our state of our central nervous system is contagious, whether we're calming down,
right,
or ramping up. Which is great when you're working with children, because the calmer you are, the more likely you are to help them.
Absolutely. And this next help now that I also use with children often at school is to name 6 colors that you see. So I invite you, if you'd like to try this one as well, to name 6 colors that you see. And if you feel called to put them in the chat, you are welcome to put them in the chat. And notice any sensations that you may notice when you name those colors. So panelists, I invite you to do that with me too, if you'd like.
And there was also a comment in the chat actually before this slide from Bethany saying that she has a student that names a color and looks around the room to find everything with that color to help calm down quickly. So she beat us to that slide. Way to go.
And Allison, I'm glad you brought that up too, because that's why we're teaching the Help Now first, because we have heard from teaching the model from around the world right now that the Help Now strategies are really helping people sometimes the most with their kids as well as with themselves. So, okay. Oh, people are putting the colors that they're seeing.
Red, brown, green, yeah. Great, ocean blue. Oh, I love that. It's calling to me. Yeah, finding a color that really resonates with you and that you like as well can be helpful.
And one other one on here is a counselor helping someone just look around the room and naming the objects seen in the room.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we were going to say if there's other strategies that you use that work for you, we invite you to put those in the chat as well. This is not an exhaustive list, and we just invite you to share those strategies that work for you as well.
Smiling changes your body chemistry. Smiling changes your brain chemistry. It helps you become more present. And so even smiling is a great resource.
All right.
So what's some other help nows?
Yeah, so this another help now is to count backwards from 20. I love this one. I use this one for myself, and it really helps the brain have this rhythm and pattern. So again, I've used it with students as well, and it works very well to either walk or just sit and count back from 20. So 20, 19, 18, I can feel my shoulders relax, 17, 16, 15, 14. As I count backwards, I can feel my body relaxing.
Me too. I just took a breath, Kelly. I see it's contagious.
And that helps get you more into your prefrontal cortex, out of your emotion lizard brain.
Yeah. And then the next one is to notice the temperature in the room or the space around you. So noticing, is it cool? Is it warm? Is it hot? Cold? Just noticing that and bringing your attention to that, again, can bring you back into the present moment. These skills really help bring us into the present moment and allow us to regulate. And what I love about these skills, as well as learning about the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, is it gives us power. It really empowers us to make a choice to use these skills and notice when we are bumped out of our resilient zone, we can use them to get back. And this is just one of them, another one of them.
What you're saying now is so important, because people who have ACEs and people who are working with ACEs, the loss of agency, the loss of being able to choose is something that I think people are truly feeling right now. And for people who grew up in a lot of violence or whatever, that inability to choose, and also having the reality denied. And these tools help people have agency, have some choice. And so that's just such an important part of all of this, giving you some control and some power back.
Great. And another one is to notice the sounds within the room and outside, or if you're outside. So just sitting and noticing. If you'd like to participate, I invite you to notice the sounds within the room.
Yes, somebody just said that she really liked the way that you said bumped out of your resiliency zone. And Kelly, I've noticed with the kids with you that they will say, I'm bumped out of my zone, Miss Kelly, Miss Purcell, I'm bumped out of my zone.
Yeah, oh yeah, and they, again, it really creates that common language, and that can be so helpful. And these Help Now skills can help them create language around ways that they can then regulate themselves as well.
Get back in the zone, and
Yeah.
instead of being activated or bumped out. It's better than saying triggered. Triggered triggers some people. Triggered activates.
Right. We're trying to change the languaging in the model. And I noticed that I didn't change it on the slide, but to say either reminders or something that sets me off, rather than using words that could, for some people, really be related to violence, which we're trying to move away from. So, but I also want to just say something. A lot of people are putting the sounds that they're hearing, and so sometimes you have to have a few moments of silence in order to be able to hear the sounds. So I'm just wondering if we can just take like maybe 20 seconds of silence. Yeah. Okay. So funny, when it became silent, I could hear a bird on the outside that before, I think when I was hearing the talking, I couldn't hear the same thing. Yeah, I especially love the sounds from the outside someone's putting in. Birds outside my window, the ceiling fan. Okay, next one.
Great. And I noticed I took a lot deeper breath there when I was noticing those sounds, and able to even hear the pleasant sounds that people were saying as well. My cat purring, oh, in the chat, that's wonderful. That can be so regulating and helpful.
The water trickling in my aquarium. Love that.
Thank you so much for sharing all of these. The next one is, the next Help Now is to walk around the room and notice your feet making contact with the ground. And this is a really important one that can be very helpful. Even when you're sitting, you can notice your feet on the ground, but a good help now is to get up and walk and notice your feet making contact with the ground. So if you'd like to take a moment and try that, you're welcome to. No pressure to, but if you'd like to, you're welcome to. Or right now I'm noticing now saying that I brought my attention to my feet making contact with the earth, and it's helping ground me and bring me back to the present moment as well.
Yeah. You know, one of the things, Kelly, that's happening in the chat is a lot of people are talking about the importance of silence. And I love to hear, because I think that for many of us, if we can be silent for a bit, that it can actually bring greater regulation to our nervous system. And sometimes we can do very quiet walking grounding that can also be something that we can listen to the silence as we walk in different places. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to move to the next one.
The final help now is push against a wall or lean back against a wall. So, and you can actually even do this while you're sitting. So if you'd like to practice this way, you can put your palms together and feel your muscles engaging. And having that muscle engagement really does help bring the brain and body back into the present moment.
I'm just shouting up a storm today.
Well, Elaine, you woke up at what? Probably 5:30.
Well, I did wake up really early, so that could be why. It was 5, only 5 today.
Thank you again for doing that.
Yeah.
And this is something that we actually, in a lot of our classrooms, we have little cutouts of hands, and they're placed around the room and places they can go push on the wall to help teach them and remind them how to regulate. So that's another reason that this one works really well for our kids.
And I love how at the schools that I visited here in New Hanover, I'm constantly reminded of CRM because there's so many visuals up around in the schools. So immersing ourselves in these with some reminders of doing these things is hugely helpful.
I'm so glad you mentioned that too, Carrie, because that's one of the reasons why we made these slides so big. So when you get the slide deck, feel free to print them out and put them around your house. Some people have little resiliency corners as well that they're trying to incorporate, no matter how small of a space. I know somebody that has, they got blankets and they put 2 chairs together, even though they have a small space, so the kids could go under the blankets and have privacy in their living space.
We all want to build a fort right now.
Really, we all want to build a fort sometimes.
I want a purple blanket with which I can build a fort. And
yeah, you know, someone is asking questions about, tell us more about the visuals in schools. I want to, in your activity booklet on the last pages, there's resources. And in the resources, you'll see the social, emotional, and learning program. It's called the C Learning Program that's based out of Emory University in Atlanta. And that project is a K through 12 social emotional learning program that has a completely free curriculum. And chapter 2 of the C Learning Program is the community resiliency model. I was a consultant for the project. It has the most fabulous training materials, including posters that you could print out to put in of the wellness skills, and that we have worked with many classrooms around the world now. That what Allison had suggested about the little hands on the wall, like there's a school in Dharmasala in India that they've actually built, they've actually painted murals on the wall for the Help Now strategies. And the children are encouraged when they're getting bumped out of their zone to be able to go and with choice to go and push against the wall or to do the different kinds of things that we have incorporated into the Help Now strategies.
And so let me ask, Kelly, are we closing in on the end of Help Now, or is there a lot more?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
Great, because we are at about 12:26, 11:26, 10:26, 9:26, and I don't have any clue as to what time it is in New Zealand right now. But we'll start closing up. So Elaine, or Kelly, if you want to share this with us.
Sure. And I was just going to say, if someone asked another thing about visuals really quickly about our calm down corners in our classrooms, we have teachers create a calm down corner, a peaceful place with a lot of these Help Now skills with things they can feel that help calm them down. And and parents, you could do that at home as well, create kind of a home calm down space or corner with a lot of these skills. And this can be used as conversational as well. So would it be helpful to go for a walk together? Can I get you a drink of water? So encouraging people to use the Help Now strategies when you see they might be bumped out, but more of in a conversational way can be really helpful.
Great.
Okay, so this is the place to stop today. So what we'd like to also encourage you to do is to download the app, and you'll see that the Help Now is in the corner, and that was done purposefully because if you're really out of your zone, you can just push the button. You can hear a voice saying these different things that we've just been learning. And you can also read it if you'd like to, but it would be a way that you can reinforce this. And so what we're going to be doing when we meet next week is we're going to get to some of the really other basic skills that will be, they're actually can be fun to learn, don't you think? And that can help us regulate our nervous system. So the name of the app is iChill. And it is, and you're going to be getting the slide set, and the slide set also has a few more slides that we're going to have for next week, just so that you know that you haven't missed anything, because this is the end point of today. And what we would like to just wish you the very best over the weekend, and we look forward to meeting you again next week. And what's our day next week, Carrie, that we're meeting on is it Thursday again?
Next week, we'll meet on Thursday, the 17th, at the same time we started today. And I'll do a post about today's webinar, and we'll include the resources that were shared today and some of the others that were mentioned. And we just look forward to seeing you all back here same time on the 14th to finish learning more about this. And I know some of you have asked about becoming trainers, as Kelly and Allison became trainers, and we'll address that in the post that I do about this, and the reminder for next week as well. So
yeah, and I did put it in the chat too, that you could contact our Trauma Resource Institute and learn how to become a trainer.
Right, and Elaine is so modest, but the SEE program that she did was actually in part at the behest of the Dalai Lama, whom she met last April, and traveled to India when it was presented to him. So again, Elaine, we just cannot thank you enough.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Connection, for your generosity in sharing your resources, your time, your talent, your energies with us. Kelly and Allison Wine, thank you so much, my friends, and Allison Sabula in outside of Boston, thank you so much for facilitating this. And so we look forward to seeing y'all next week. And in the meantime, touch your heart, stay grounded. Remember, you have agency, and these tools will help you remember that you have the agency, you have choice.
Thank you so much, and thank you for all the thankfulness in the chat as well. And I'm seeing a replication of a question. The C Learning program, when you get your activity book, that the very last page has all the information about C Learning that you can learn more about.
Okay.
All right, thank you everyone. We'll see you next week. Blessings. We're going to ask you next week if you've done any Help Now strategies.
That's right.
A good time to practice them, and God knows we have reason to practice them. Yes.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.